The oceans cover over 70% of our blue planet, acting as the very engine for our climate systems. They are also the foundation for almost all life and many crucial geological processes we observe daily. Now, just picture a single, inexplicable event that causes them to completely vanish from the face of the Earth overnight. In that very first instant after the disappearance, the entire world would grind to a sudden, complete standstill. Beaches that were crashing with waves yesterday would suddenly transform into endless, desolate deserts of wet sand and sharp, crystallized salt. Vast container ships, massive cruise liners, and deep-diving submarines would all be left hopelessly stranded, lying motionless on the seabed like gigantic, silent skeletons. Tragically, millions upon millions of incredible marine species would perish within the first few short hours of this catastrophe. A truly apocalyptic odor would begin to permeate the atmosphere everywhere, emanating from rotting piles of algae and countless dead sea creatures. This foul smell would be mixed with the sight of massive, collapsed marine mammals, lying far from the former waterline. Simultaneously, the overall level of breathable oxygen in our atmosphere would start to drop noticeably because the oceans produce nearly half of all the planet's oxygen supply. On the climatic front, the devastating consequences would manifest themselves with terrifying immediacy, functioning essentially as the Earth's enormous global air conditioning unit. Their absence creates immediate thermal instability. Daytime temperatures would begin to soar while nighttime lows would plummet to absolutely extreme, uninhabitable levels. While destructive hurricanes would cease to form over the now dry ocean floors, new types of superstorms would quickly emerge. We would witness the terrifying rise of colossal, planet-scaring sandstorms, accompanied by intensely unpredictable, violent winds. The fundamental global water cycle, which sustains all terrestrial life, would instantly and completely shatter into pieces. Without the immense process of oceanic evaporation, precipitation would effectively cease across almost the entire globe. Within just a few agonizing weeks, even mighty rivers and large, freshwater lakes would start visibly shrinking and turning to dust. This lack of water would cause the world's plant life to wither and die off rapidly, leading to the total collapse of global agriculture. Very quickly thereafter, a devastating and widespread hunger crisis would become the defining challenge for the remaining human population. Furthermore, the exposed continental shelves and former ocean floors would dramatically reshape the world map as we know it. These newly revealed landscapes would expose massive mountain ranges, deep canyons, and enormous craters never before seen by human eyes. However, this geological reveal comes with a deadly catch. Enormous quantities of deeply trapped carbon dioxide would be suddenly released into the air. This massive influx of greenhouse gas would then act as a terrifying accelerant, speeding up the rate of global warming exponentially. Considering all these factors, it becomes clear that human civilization could simply not sustain itself on the surface for a very long time moving forward. All those bustling, beautiful coastal cities that we cherish would degrade swiftly into dusty, forgotten wastelands. Every available reserve of fresh drinking water, both surface and shallow underground, would quickly deplete entirely. The atmosphere itself would lose its precious moisture content, becoming intensely dry, thin, and ultimately unbreathable for humans. In essence, our vibrant blue marble would transform into a desolate planet, eerily similar in appearance to the barren surface of Mars. The resulting Earth would be painfully cold, incredibly arid, and utterly lifeless across its entire exposed exterior. Long-term survival would then depend entirely upon retreating into secure, highly advanced underground bases built deep below the surface. These isolated colonies would rely on cutting-edge technology to artificially generate the most basic necessities, like clean water and breathable air. The inescapable conclusion is that without our oceans, the planet we call Earth would cease to be recognizable in any meaningful way. It would become a profoundly different world, one completely incapable of supporting the complex biodiversity and life we currently take for granted. Let's revisit that initial moment of shocking disappearance and analyze the immediate impact on coastal regions. Picture the sheer suddenness of that massive volume of water simply ceasing to exist in a single breath. The sound of receding tides would be replaced by an unnatural, dead silence stretching out across the newly exposed mudflats. This dramatic change instantly removes the largest heat sink on the planet, beginning the thermal nightmare. Think about the immediate economic devastation as global shipping lines, the backbone of trade, instantly halt forever. Every single port in the world would become a monument to obsolete infrastructure, stranded far inland. Look closer at the exposed seabed where the trenches used to be, revealing abyssal plains, now baking under the sun. The immense pressure change alone would likely cause immediate seismic activity as the crust adjusts to the missing weight. Consider the thousands of deep-sea hydrothermal vents, now silent and dry, their unique ecosystems instantly destroyed. The loss of the thermohaline circulation, the ocean's great conveyor belt, would stop distributing heat across the globe immediately. Weather patterns over land would become wildly erratic, shifting from baking heat waves to sudden, unexpected freezes. The air quality issue goes beyond oxygen, as ocean currents also absorb massive amounts of atmospheric pollutants. These pollutants, now concentrated elsewhere or released, would create localized toxic environments on land. Even shallow coastal groundwater systems, fed by the ocean, would rapidly become contaminated or completely exhausted. The biological diversity contained in coral reefs, which support a quarter of all marine life, would be lost in mere hours. Imagine the sight of bleached, ghostly white coral skeletons stretching for miles under the harsh new sunlight. The very process of weathering and erosion on the coastlines would change from water-based to wind-based erosion almost instantly. This means sand dunes would start migrating inland at alarming rates, quickly burying former coastal communities. The global fishing industry, which feeds billions, would simply vanish from existence in one terrifying afternoon. We must acknowledge the sheer scale of biomass that would be lost, removing a primary global food source overnight. Think of the scientific repercussions. Entire fields of marine biology would become purely historical studies. Exploratory deep-sea vehicles, designed for immense pressure, would be rendered useless relics on dry land. The magnetic field generation, which relies on the liquid outer core, might face subtle but significant long-term pressure changes. Even the moon's tides, which rely on the mass of the oceans, would cease their predictable rhythm on the land. This lack of tidal pull would eventually impact coastlines in new ways. Though the immediate dryout is the bigger threat, the sheer volume of organic material decomposing on the ocean floor would create an unprecedented methane spike initially. This methane surge would briefly amplify the greenhouse effect before the $XD280_. $2 release takes over as the dominant warming agent. Farmers relying on predictable rainfall patterns would find their entire annual planning rendered obsolete within a single season. The concept of wetlands, vital for filtering water and housing specific life, would simply be erased from the geography of Earth. The iconic soundscape of the planet, from the roar of the surf to the calls of whales, would be replaced by an overwhelming emptiness. We would start to truly appreciate the ocean's role as the planet's giant, silent moderator of temperature extremes. The visible difference between night and day would become much more pronounced due to the loss of water's thermal buffering capacity. Areas deep inland, previously protected by moderate climates, would now face harsh continental extremes, similar to deserts. The psychological toll on survivors, witnessing such a profound, fundamental change to their world, would be immense and devastating. Society would need to rapidly pivot its entire focus from growth and development to sheer, immediate resource acquisition and survival. The historical geography, marked by maritime exploration and trade routes, would become a strange, almost mythological memory. Imagine trying to explain the concept of swimming or sailing to the first generation born into this new, dry world. The global economy, inextricably linked to sea trade and ocean resources, would collapse into localized barter systems almost immediately. Governments would struggle to manage mass migrations away from the increasingly uninhabitable, arid, former coastal zones. Specialized engineering efforts would need to focus on creating sealed, high-humidity environments for critical food production indoors. The vast exposed plains would become treacherous landscapes, where dust devils evolve into genuine threats to surface travel. Water scarcity would instantly become the single most valuable commodity, surpassing gold or any other material wealth ever known. Desalination plants, once a solution for coastal drinking water, would now be useless monuments to a bygone era of easy access. The very composition of the air would change, becoming less humid and leading to rapid dehydration for any exposed organism. Trees and large vegetation far inland, adapted to a specific water table, would begin showing signs of severe stress within months. This terrestrial die-off would further reduce the planet's capacity to sequester the rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. The search for underground aquifers, previously a secondary concern, would become the primary focus of all remaining geological exploration. Future archaeologists will study the wrecks of oil tankers and fishing trawlers as definitive evidence of the lost ocean age. The profound silence across the former seabeds would be broken only by the howl of wind, sculpting the newly exposed topography. Rivers that managed to hang on initially would become trickles, then stagnant pools, and finally just cracked clay scars on the landscape. The loss of the ocean's immense buffer against meteoroids and space debris, while minor, also removes one layer of planetary protection. Ultimately, the scenario paints a picture of a planet fundamentally recalibrated for sterility rather than abundance. The familiar blue marble seen from space would be replaced by a dull brown and white orb, scarred by massive, desiccated features. It forces us to confront how much our entire civilization is built upon the stable, predictable presence of this enormous body of water. Every breath we take, every meal we eat, every moderate day we experience is fundamentally subsidized by the health of the sea. This thought experiment serves as a stark reminder of the delicate, interconnected systems that keep our world habitable. Even a small percentage of ocean degradation has measurable effects. So total loss is truly an extinction-level event. We must protect these vital, life-giving waters, not just for the creatures within them, but for the survival of everything on the land. The next time you see the waves, remember the massive, irreplaceable role they play in keeping our atmosphere alive and our climate stable. Protect the ocean, because without its massive, rhythmic presence, Earth's story takes a terrifyingly different turn. Imagine the silent, empty basin and realize that the future of life depends on keeping that blue expanse full.